Did you ever have that feeling when you first get into K-dramas and you're like, huh, this is actually pretty good? Then you get past the two unique shows and everything is a generic rom-com, usually with a love triangle somewhere in there. 2521 is like that experience but condensed into one show. Just kidding, it's actually pretty alright. 2521 is about aspiring fencer Nahido as she tries to overtake her hero Ko Yu-rim after she turns out to be a massive bitch. Then she falls in love with that one guy who's played by Nam Joo-hyuk, because this is a Korean rom-com, so it's either gonna be him or Kim Son-ho. The whole show is propped up with the typical coming-of-age story themes: growing older, taking on more responsibility, life is an education. They even say that one explicitly at one point.
지나고 보면 모든 게 연습이었던 날들.
Then there's also this idea that Nahido is passing on the torch to her daughter, who wants to quit ballet, but honestly she's in the show for maybe like 30 minutes, and she doesn't really feel like she adds a whole lot in the time that she's there. The only really interesting aspect of her character is how she fleshes out Nahido's development, so it really feels like they could have gotten away with having even less than 30 minutes for her, to be honest. The show is actually really more of a period piece than anything consistent that you can nail down. It starts off as a kind of anime-y feeling sports show, and then switches into a rom-com, and then switches into something poignant and somewhat tragic towards the end. And all of this is going on while like 4 other plot lines might be going on in the background at any given time, only around half of which will actually be resolved at any point. But man, if you've ever wanted to live the life of a Korean wage slave during an economic downturn, do I have some good news for you. The best part is that the show explores some feelings that make the relationship between Nahido and Baek Hee-jin feel more real than the typical romance show. The characters are assholes a lot of the time, but that's what makes them feel real, like the scenes where Baek Hee-jin doesn't even know what to say because Nahido is such a fucking stupid subhuman. They're all driveling morons, and that's exactly what makes them just like real teenagers.
Good day.
But the real proof of how strong the character writing is that they're all really likable in spite of all that. That being said, if you don't speak Korean, it's gonna be difficult to appreciate that writing. Why? Because it's a Netflix show, so you know the English subtitles are going to be the worst garbage imaginable.
On the security cameras, he was jerking off.
It's utopia porn.
So naturally, I took it upon myself to meticulously explain every last mistranslation with surgeon-like precision to my girlfriend during the tunnel breakup scene, which is pretty difficult when she's crying. They really translated
오늘 너 먼저 가.
as go be awesome. Even if you are stuck with the Netflix subtitles, there's a lot to appreciate about the writing. For starters, Nahido's character development is incredible. Nahido's mom was an asshole who had no faith in her, so she's all like, fuck you mom, I'm gonna go do Wicca in my basement and go out with black guys. And by that I mean do my best at fencing. She also becomes critical of the way in which she and Baek Hee-jin only support each other when things are easy, because every time she attempted something difficult at all, her mom never supported her. And then in the scenes where she's a mom, her daughter's sick of her shit, because she's constantly overbearing and her expectations feel excessive. Which is the same problem that Baek Hee-jin had with her that caused them to break up. You see, Nahido's biggest flaw throughout the entire show is actually the one thing that most people like her for, and the exact same thing that makes her admired. She doesn't give up.
그리고 왜 연습하는 걸로 혼나야 돼요? 열심히 하는 걸로.
If you do not push yourself, you will accomplish nothing. Push yourself!
Now, this applies to the big things, like how she drops everything else in her life to work on her training, and how she waits on people who she knows aren't coming back for her. But it can also even be seen in the little things, like how she still collects stickers made for small children, and persists in other childish things like that. Then there's Nahido's mom, and the entire show you're thinking, I hate this dumb fucking bitch. And then, she turns it around in like one scene, where it turns out the reason she doesn't talk about her dead husband isn't spite, but because it hurts too much. And before she even says it, you can just tell, because the subtleties of Shin Jae-kyung's performance are just that incredible. You see, Na-hee-do and Mom-hee-do are actually very similar. Na-hee-do is mad at Mom-hee-do because she doesn't find time for her, but then she and Becky Jean don't find time for each other. Plus, they're both stubborn as fuck and are super devoted to their work, to the point of it being pretty unhealthy. But also, that's kind of where the buck ends. They're the only characters who really actually have an arc. Moon Ji-young starts the show as vain and self-focused, and ends as a vain and self-focused person in business. Knock on wood. He seems like he possibly goes from pursuing Ko Yu-rim as a means of inflating his ego towards genuinely caring about her, but really that's about all you're gonna get out of him. Ko Yu-rim and Ji Sung-wan are easily the weakest in terms of character development. Ko Yu-rim's whole thing is that she feels crushed under her parents' expectations of her. She does nothing for herself. Everything is constantly for her parents because she's a big like mama's girl and daddy's girl or whatever. But that's also kind of how she ends the show. I mean, maybe. She does quit fencing at the end, but then she goes right back to fencing in order to teach to a bunch of kids. The problem with Ko Yu-rim's arc is that it just doesn't actually end. She was supposed to win the Olympics for her parents so that she can get some cash, and she had the final showdown with Na-hee-do, which is arguably the climax. But then, as opposed to feeling like the conclusion to what the entire show was working towards, they had this dumb high school girl bullshit where Na-hee-do is mad that Ko Yu-rim isn't answering her AOL messages or some shit like that.
그건 그래.
Does she get the money in the end? I don't know. As far as I know, the show doesn't say. Then, Ji Sung-wan has this thing where she gets ass mad because a teacher is still physically punishing students even though...
That's illegal!
This leads to her getting expelled, even though she's a smart, promising student. But then, she just kinda gets into college anyway, which leads to the same thing that happens in real life when you go to college. You end up a lonely, raging alcoholic. The whole abuse thing is never really resolved, and you never actually see how this affects Ji Sung-wan. Honestly, that's all there even really is to say about the side characters. It's really a show about Becky Jean and Na-hee-do with some Ko Yu-rim thrown in there. And all the other characters just kinda hang off to the side like your dad watching me and your mom. With that being said, I think it makes sense to finally talk about what actually becomes of Na-hee-do and Becky Jean. There's this one bit where the rom-com part of the show is in full swing, and they're doing the American sitcom thing of like, oh, I love him, but he needs to realize our love is more important than work. They actually had this reveal where they flash forward and Becky Jean congratulates Na-hee-do on her wedding, implying that she doesn't marry him. But you don't really know what's up yet. But he finds time for her and they're gonna go on a trip and then, and I swear to God this is true, fucking 9/11 happens, no joke, and all of a sudden there's like dead bodies and shit, and Becky Jean eventually comes back and is all like, you don't understand my pain, Na-hee-do, I've seen death. And at this point they're broken up, which is pretty typical for the second act of a rom-com, and I thought like, oh okay, this is the part where they get back together because he realizes love is more important than work, and it was revealed that she was actually married to him the whole time or something. But then, imagine my shock, when the show has the most Korean ending ever, where Becky Jean realizes his work is actually more important than love. The funny part is that in the future, apparently Na-hee-do's husband was getting emotionally cucked as fuck, because Na-hee-do was still thinking of the dude she was trying to fuck like 30 years ago. And it ends with her picturing herself conveying what she could never convey to Becky Jean on that day via her diary. But the fucked up thing is you don't see who Na-hee-do married even once, implying that he's also too busy with work, which kind of invalidates the whole point of them breaking up in the show. Now, I hated this ending at first, but the more I've stewed on it, the more it's made sense to me. Na-hee-do thinks that she can have it all. She puts in the effort to go forward and she does incredible things. And that's what makes being around her intoxicating to all the characters in the show. Becky Jean is inspired by the ambition of her and the success of her mother, and also starts down the path to do big things. But you only think you can do big things when you're young. In a world where billionaires say you have to work 80 hours a week to be successful, where the average person works more than the typical medieval serf, and where more and more people are entering the rat race towards major success, we've all become miniature versions of Nahido and Becky Jean. We want to have it all. But the fact that we want to have it all is exactly why we lose what we have. Even though by the end Nahido is retired and Becky Jean is back in Korea, there's still no chance of them ever getting back together. They were too busy with their own ambitions because they deluded themselves into thinking they could have it all. And because of that, they got nothing. All that's left of their dreams is a memory.
그 엄마 앨범에 맨날 등장하는 사람들이랑
걔네랑 내가 바다를 언제 갔어? 기억 안 나는데?
Or not even a memory. All of this is set up really well too. If you've been paying attention, you remember I said the show feels all over the place. I thought the show was just being inconsistent, but maybe it's actually a clever trap. The show is a tragedy that wears the mask of a rom-com sports show thing really well. Most shows that get sad towards the end blow their load too soon, and while there's sad elements to 25-21 throughout the show, you always expect Nahido to succeed, and she usually does. And that's exactly why you don't expect the ending to repeatedly kick you in the balls like it does. It's actually pretty good though. If you can down enough Ritalin to keep track of all the themes and plot lines in your head, there's a pretty good K-drama in here. Nam Joo-hyuk continually proves that he's the guy, delivering an incredible performance in everything he's in. I'd never really noticed Kim Tae-ri in anything, but the amount of nuance in her performance made her immediately likable, and you can consider me won over. But that's really all I have to say for today, so I suppose that means it's time for me to break up with you losers for a little bit. I'll see you guys later.
If you think you can graduate from this school without kissing my cock, you are dead wrong.